Alexander the Great Childhood, Education, and the Formation of a Future Conqueror. Part 1, Chapter 1. When Alexander the Great is born in the summer of 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedon, his arrival is far more than a private family event. It takes place at a moment of profound political transformation. Alexander's father, Philip II of Macedon, is in the process of lifting Macedon out of decades of instability and relative insignificance. Through military reform, diplomacy, and calculated force, Philip is reshaping his kingdom into a rising power within the Greek world. Alexander is therefore not born merely as a son. He is welcomed as the potential future of an expanding state. From the very beginning, his life is framed by expectation. Olympias, in the language of destiny, Alexander's mother, Olympias, comes from Epirus. She is a woman of intense character, deeply religious, fiercely emotional, and politically perceptive. From early on, she begins to surround her son's origins with myth. She speaks of Zeus, of divine favor, of dreams and omens. In her telling, Alexander is not simply the heir to a throne. He is chosen. Whether Olympias truly believed these stories or consciously shaped them as instruments of power cannot be known with certainty. The ancient sources leave room for both interpretations, but in the world Alexander grows up in, divine ancestry is not dismissed as fantasy. It is a language of legitimacy. To descend from a god is to stand above ordinary men and above ordinary claims to power. A child between two worlds. Alexander's childhood unfolds within a constant tension. On one side stands his father, pragmatic, disciplined, unsentimental. Philip teaches through example that power must be secured, defended, and enforced. On the other side stands Olympias, mystical, symbolic, absolute in her conviction that Alexander is destined for greatness beyond the limits of ordinary kingship. Between these two forces, Alexander learns early that rule is not sustained by strength alone, nor by belief alone, but by the careful balance of both. Politics and myth, calculation and destiny. This duality will never leave him. It will shape not only how Alexander understands power, but how he presents himself to the world long after both parents are gone. Macedon, a kingdom with an inferiority complex. To understand Alexander the Great, one must first understand the kingdom in which he grows up. In the eyes of the Greek world, Macedon is an outsider. The Greeks regard the Macedonians as uncivilized. Their language is considered foreign, their customs crude, their political system, monarchy, outdated. While Athens debates democracy and philosophy, and Sparta cultivates discipline and military virtue, Macedon remains a kingdom ruled by a single man, supported by personal loyalty and force. To many Greeks, Macedon is not truly part of the Hellenic world. It exists at its edge, ambition born from contempt. The disdain directed at Macedon produces an unintended consequence. Rather than accepting inferiority, Alexander internalizes a powerful urge, the need to prove himself, not through debate or persuasion, but through action. Where others argue, he will act. Where others question legitimacy, he will impose it. From this sense of exclusion grows a defining trait of Alexander's character, the belief that true authority is not negotiated, but demonstrated. This conviction will follow him throughout his life, training for a life of hardship. This form of upbringing is no coincidence. Alexander is being prepared for a life in which deprivation will be normal, especially for a future commander who must endure the same conditions as his soldiers. From an early age, he learns to accept hardship as part of existence. He learns to endure hunger, to ignore cold, to overcome exhaustion. These lessons are not framed as punishments, but as expectations. Mastery over oneself. Through this rigid discipline, Alexander develops an essential skill: self-control. Before he can command others, he must first learn to command himself. Before he can demand obedience, he must learn endurance. This early training instills in him the belief that authority is inseparable from personal restraint, and that leadership requires the willingness to suffer alongside those who follow. It is a lesson Alexander will never forget. Knowledge and power. No contradiction. When Aristotle becomes Alexander's teacher, he does not merely pass on knowledge, he imparts a worldview. According to Aristotle, man is a political being by nature. Power does not rest on force alone, but on order, structure, and understanding. Rule, in his view, requires insight into how societies function, how they think, how they organize themselves, and where their weaknesses lie. Alexander absorbs these ideas with remarkable intensity, learning to observe and understand. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander learns to look beyond appearances. He is taught to observe people carefully, to study their customs, to compare their traditions, and to recognize the underlying principles that hold societies together. This education goes far beyond philosophy. It provides Alexander with tools that will later prove decisive on campaign. He will not only defeat enemies in battle, he will understand them. Conquest as transformation. What Alexander takes from Aristotle is a crucial insight. Lasting power depends on integration. To rule vast territories, one must do more than conquer them. They must be administered, reorganized, and reshaped. Different peoples require different approaches. Order cannot simply be imposed everywhere in the same way. This lesson will define Alexander's later rule. He will not merely destroy old structures. He will adapt them, merge them, and place himself at their center. An intellectual drive for expansion. Even in his youth, Alexander displays an unusual curiosity. He is fascinated by distant lands, unfamiliar plants, strange animals, and foreign peoples. His interest in the world beyond Macedon is not purely strategic, it is intellectual. Alexander's desire to expand is therefore not limited to military ambition. It is also driven by a hunger to see, to understand, and to experience the unknown. For him, is it a way of engaging with the world itself? The legend of the horse Bucephalus is often told as a story of youthful brilliance. In truth, it is something more precise, a study of character. A horse trader brings the animal to the Macedonian court. Bucephalus is large, powerful, and uncontrollable. No one can mount him. The horse rears, resists, and throws off every rider who attempts to tame him. After several failed efforts, Philip II of Macedon prepares to send the animal back. The price is high, and the horse seems useless. Seeing what others miss, Alexander, no more than 13 years old, has been watching in silence. He does not focus on the strength of the horse, nor on its aggression. Instead, he notices something others have overlooked. Bucephalus is not afraid of men. He is afraid of his own shadow. Alexander understands that the horse's fear is not a matter of force, but of perception. He turns Bucephalus toward the sun so that the shadow falls behind him. He speaks calmly, without urgency, without threat. Then he mounts the horse. Moments later, Alexander is riding away at full speed. A father's recognition. According to later tradition, Philip watches in astonishment and speaks words that would echo through history. "Seek a greater kingdom, my son. Macedon is too small for you." Whether Philip truly said these words cannot be proven with certainty. Ancient sources often shape memory into symbol, but the scene itself conveys something essential: confidence born from insight. What matters is not the quotation, but the lesson. Alexander demonstrates, at a remarkably young age, a defining trait. He believes that problems can be solved where others see only failure, not through brute force, but through understanding. He does not overpower the horse, he comprehends it. This confidence, rooted in observation, calm judgment, and decisive action, will become one of the foundations of Alexander's later life. Long before he commands armies, he learns that mastery begins with insight, a dangerous closeness. Throughout Alexander's childhood and youth, Olympias remains his most influential point of reference. She nurtures his belief in a special destiny. From an early age, she reinforces the idea that Alexander is meant for more than ordinary kingship. At the same time, she subtly encourages distance and suspicion toward his father. An absent king, a present influence, Philip II of Macedon is frequently absent. His life is consumed by campaigns, negotiations, and political maneuvering. When he is not at war, he is entangled in alliances, marriages, and court intrigue. This absence creates a vacuum. Olympias fills it, not only with emotional closeness, but with influence. She becomes guide, confidant, and interpreter of the world around Alexander. Lessons in distrust. From his mother, Alexander learns that the royal court is not a place of stability. It is a landscape of shifting loyalties, calculated marriages, and hidden rivalries. Power is never secure. Trust is never absolute. Olympias teaches him not only to assert himself, but to remain vigilant. In her view, survival at court depends on awareness. Alliances can dissolve overnight. Even family bonds may serve political ends. These lessons leave a lasting mark. The cost of early awareness, 20. As a result of this upbringing, Alexander grows cautious in his relationships. He learns to rely primarily on his own judgment. Complete trust becomes rare. Later in life, this tendency will shape his rule. He will surround himself with companions and officers, but reserve full confidence for very few, perhaps only for himself. The closeness between mother and son strengthens Alexander's sense of destiny, but it also plants the seeds of isolation, a trait that will deepen as his power expands. Alexander the Great, the young Alexander, between admiration and rivalry. Part 1, Chapter 2. Despite all tensions, Alexander deeply admires his father. Philip II of Macedon is a military genius. He has transformed the Macedonian army, perfected the phalanx, and imposed Macedonian dominance over Greece. Even as Alexander grows up, Philip is already planning a campaign against the Persian Empire. For the young prince, his father is both model and measure. Admiration turns to comparison. As Alexander matures, admiration gradually gives way to comparison. Philip's achievements are immense. They define the standard against which Alexander measures himself. But with each year, the awareness grows that being heir is not enough. Alexander does not wish merely to inherit power. He wishes to surpass it. This desire is not born of rebellion, but of ambition, a growing sense of inevitability. Alexander senses that his time will come. He observes his father closely, learning from his successes, absorbing his methods, and noting his limitations. The relationship between them becomes more complex. Respect is accompanied by competition, loyalty by impatience. Alexander begins to understand that greatness leaves little room for succession. A king of Philip's stature casts a long shadow. To step beyond it will require more than patience. The seed of conflict. This quiet rivalry shapes Alexander's inner world. It sharpens his resolve and fuels his drive. He does not yet act openly against his father, but inwardly he prepares for a moment when admiration will no longer be enough. When that moment arrives, Alexander intends to be ready. Philip II, court intrigue, and the path to the throne. The father, architect of a new Macedon, Part 1, Chapter 3. The father, architect of a new Macedon. When Philip II of Macedon ascends the Macedonian throne, the kingdom is fractured and vulnerable. Internal rivalries weaken authority, external threats press in from all sides, and Macedon holds little weight in the Greek world. Within a remarkably short time, Philip changes this reality. He is not a visionary in the philosophical sense. He is a pragmatist, an organizer, a reformer, a man who understands power as something that must be built patiently and maintained relentlessly. Reforming Warren State Philip creates a standing army and reshapes it from the ground up. He reforms training, discipline, and command structures. New tactics are introduced, new formations tested, and the Macedonian phalanx is transformed into an instrument capable of dominating Greek battlefields. Yet military strength alone does not satisfy him. Philip understands politics as a complex web, alliances, marriages, shifting loyalties, and calculated intimidation. War and diplomacy are not opposites in his thinking, but complementary tools. Where force is insufficient, influence must follow. Under his rule, Macedon ceases to be peripheral. It becomes unavoidable, growing up in a giant's shadow. Alexander grows up watching all of this unfold. He is raised in the presence of a man who accomplishes what others only imagine. For the son, this reality carries a double meaning. It inspires admiration, but it also imposes an almost unbearable standard. Philip's success leaves little room for a successor to simply continue where he left off. To follow such a father is not merely to inherit power, it is to be measured against it. Alexander absorbs these lessons silently. He learns how authority is constructed, how loyalty is secured, and how fear is managed. But he also understands something more personal, that to step beyond his father's legacy, imitation will not be enough. Power is never secure. At court, Alexander learns that power is never self-evident. It must be defended, displayed, and, when necessary, enforced. Status offers no lasting protection. Favor can be withdrawn as easily as it is granted. What matters is proximity to the king, usefulness in moments of decision, and the ability to survive political storms. This understanding forms early, a school of observation. For Alexander the Great, the court becomes both classroom and proving ground. He watches alliances form and dissolve. He sees how favor can decide careers and lives. He understands that closeness to the king is a source of power, but also of danger. These observations sharpen his instincts. Long before Alexander commands armies, he learns how authority is performed, how loyalty is tested, and how swiftly political landscapes can change. It is an education no formal teacher could provide. First trial, Alexander steps into the light. Even in his youth, Alexander is entrusted with real political responsibility. While Philip II of Macedon is absent on campaign, the young prince is appointed regent. For the first time, authority is not theoretical. It is real, and it is his. Alexander is not yet 20 years old when he faces his first serious test. Command in the father's absence. During Philip's absence, unrest breaks out among the mighty, a Thracian tribe on the northern frontier. Alexander responds decisively. He suppresses the uprising, secures the region, and founds a new city, naming it Alexandropolis. This act is deliberate. Founding a city is not merely a military measure. It is a political statement. Alexander marks territory, imposes order, and leaves a permanent symbol of authority behind. More than a footnote. This story is more than a marginal detail in Alexander's early life. It demonstrates that Philip trusts his son, at least to a certain extent. More importantly, it shows that Alexander is capable of acting independently. He displays leadership, determination, and an instinct for command. Success reinforces his confidence. For the first time, Alexander does not see himself solely as an heir waiting in the shadow of a greater figure. He experiences himself as an active ruler, a shift in perception. From this moment onward, something changes. Alexander begins to measure himself not only against expectations, but against results. He has acted and succeeded. Authority is no longer an abstract future. It is something he has already exercised. This shift does not go unnoticed. As Alexander's self-assurance grows, so does the underlying tension between father and son. The line between successor and rival begins to blur. The path toward open conflict has not yet been taken, but it has clearly come into view. Admiration and rivalry. Alexander admires his father and measures himself against him at the same time. Philip II of Macedon has subdued Greece, forced the city-states into submission, and laid the groundwork for a great campaign against the Persian Empire. Alexander understands what this means. If Philip succeeds, his name will be remembered as that of a unifier and perhaps as a conqueror. It is a project that promises glory. It may even promise immortality, the desire to surpass. But Alexander wants more. He does not wish to be the one who inherits what another man has begun. He does not want to complete a design conceived by someone else. He wants to surpass it. This ambition is not spoken aloud. For a long time it remains internal, carefully contained. Outwardly, Alexander presents himself as the loyal son, the obedient successor, the future king-in-waiting. Inwardly, however, pressure builds. Success is challenge. Every achievement of his father becomes a benchmark and a provocation. Each victory Philip secures raises the standard Alexander feels compelled to exceed. The admiration remains genuine. So does the rivalry. These two forces coexist uneasily, shaping Alexander's inner world. Respect does not diminish ambition. Loyalty does not erase competition. Instead, they intensify one another, a tension without resolution. For now, the conflict remains unresolved. Alexander waits, observes, and prepares. He understands that his moment has not yet arrived, but he is equally certain that it will. When it does, admiration alone will no longer be enough. Olympia, Power Behind the Throne. Part 1, Chapter 4. Within this growing tension, Olympia plays a central role. She is not a passive queen consort. She is a politically minded woman, acutely aware of her position and determined to secure both her own influence and her son's claim to the throne. Olympia understands that power at the Macedonian court is never stable and never permanent. An outsider with a cause Olympia does not come from the Macedonian nobility. Her origins lie in Epirus, a fact that makes her vulnerable within the court. She is regarded with suspicion by many of the Macedonian elite, and she knows it. This vulnerability sharpens her resolve. She becomes fiercely protective of Alexander's position and relentless in defending his legitimacy. Potential rivals are treated not as abstract threats, but as dangers that must be anticipated and neutralized. Again and again, she reminds her son of a simple truth. Power is never guaranteed. Cultivating vigilance. Olympia actively shapes Alexander's perception of the court around him. She reinforces his mistrust toward possible competitors and warns him against complacency. In her view, vigilance is not paranoia, it is survival. At the same time, she gradually distances Alexander from his father. As Philip II of Macedon moves away from Olympia, both politically and personally, her portrayal of him changes. In her narratives, Philip becomes an unpredictable factor, brilliant, powerful, but increasingly unreliable. Alexander listens. Between two poles, as a result, Alexander grows up caught between two opposing influences. On one side stands Philip, the military architect, the reformer, the conqueror whose achievements command admiration. On the other stands Olympias, the strategist, the guardian of legitimacy, the voice of caution and suspicion. Between these two poles, Alexander learns that power can be gained through force, but preserved only through awareness. This dual influence deepens his understanding of rule. It also intensifies the internal tension that will eventually demand resolution. Alexander the Great, The Marriage That Changed Everything, Part 1, Chapter 5. In 337 BC, Philip II of Macedon marries a young Macedonian noblewoman, Cleopatra Eurydice, the niece of his general Attalus. Politically, the marriage is explosive. For the first time, Philip unites himself with a woman from the Macedonian high nobility. It is a clear signal to the court and to the kingdom, a threat to succession. For Alexander the Great, the marriage comes as a shock. Until this moment, his position as heir has appeared secure. Now, for the first time, a genuine danger emerges. A son born from this union would be of purely Macedonian descent, something Alexander is not. What had once been unspoken anxiety becomes tangible risk. Succession is no longer a matter of assumption. It becomes a question. The banquet. At the wedding celebration, tension erupts into the open. During the festivities, Attalus publicly expresses his hope that Philip will now produce a legitimate heir. The remark is not accidental. It is heard by everyone present and understood by Alexander immediately. Whether the words are meant as insult, provocation, or political positioning hardly matters. Alexander feels attacked, perhaps even threatened. The atmosphere collapses, voices rise, cups are thrown. Philip, heavily intoxicated, draws his sword and attempts to confront his son, only to stumble and fall. The moment is humiliating, public, irreversible, a sentence that breaks the illusion. According to later accounts, Alexander reacts with biting irony. He mocks his father, remarking that the man who intends to march from Europe to Asia cannot even manage to cross the space between two tables. Whether these exact words were spoken cannot be proven with certainty. Ancient historians often shape such moments into symbols, but the meaning of the scene is unmistakable. An open rupture. What happens that night marks a turning point. The conflict between father and son, long contained beneath the surface, is now exposed before the court. Respect gives way to open hostility. Loyalty is strained beyond repair. From this moment on, the relationship between Philip and Alexander is fundamentally altered. The path toward reconciliation narrows. The path toward confrontation opens. Alexander the Great Flight and Return, Part 1, Chapter 6. After the public confrontation, Alexander leaves the court together with Olympias. They first withdraw to Epirus and later to Illyria. For a designated heir, such a move is highly risky. Distance from the court can quickly turn into political isolation. Yet Alexander appears convinced that his position is in immediate danger. Leaving is not an act of defiance. It is an act of self-preservation. A brief exile. The period of separation is short. After only a few months, Alexander returns. Philip II of Macedon seeks reconciliation, perhaps out of reflection, perhaps out of political necessity. A public rupture between king and heir would weaken the stability Philip has worked so carefully to construct. Outwardly, the conflict is settled. The court resumes its routines. Appearances are restored. Trust is not restored. But beneath the surface, something fundamental has changed. Alexander now understands that his succession is not guaranteed. It depends on circumstance, power, and perception. What once seemed assured has revealed itself as conditional. Philip, in turn, recognizes something equally unsettling. His son is not merely an heir waiting in line. He is a force in his own right, a potential rival as much as a successor. A relationship transformed. The reconciliation restores proximity, but not trust. Father and son continue to stand side by side, yet the relationship between them is no longer what it was. Caution replaces confidence. Awareness replaces certainty. From this point forward, both men understand that the future of Macedon will not unfold quietly. The next decisive moment will not be shaped by family bonds, but by power. Alexander the Great, A Kingdom on the Brink of Asia, Part 1, Chapter 7. While the personal tensions within the royal family intensify, Philip II of Macedon's power politics reach their culmination. The Greek city-states have been defeated, subdued, or bound by obligation. Through the League of Corinth, they are formally committed to a common campaign against the Persian Empire. What Philip has been building for decades now stands complete. The moment before history, Philip is on the verge of inscribing his name into history. The invasion of Asia has been planned in detail. The objective is clear. The first contingents have already been sent ahead, securing positions and preparing the ground for a campaign unlike any undertaken by a Greek power before. For the first time, The conquest of the Persian Empire appears not as a dream, but as an imminent reality. Alexander waits. Alexander witnesses all of this from close proximity. He watches as his father's long-term strategy reaches its decisive phase. He understands the scale of what is about to happen and what it would mean for Philip's legacy if the campaign succeeds. Yet Alexander does not act. He waits, whether out of caution, ambition, or an unspoken awareness that events are about to take a different course remains uncertain. What is clear is that he recognizes the gravity of the moment. Everything is prepared. Everything is in place. The calm before the break Macedon stands unified. Greece is bound by treaty. Asia lies open beyond the Hellespont. The kingdom is poised for expansion on an unprecedented scale. And at the center of it all, two generations stand side by side. One ready to begin the greatest campaign of his life, the other waiting for a moment that will change everything. The leap into Asia is imminent, but history will take an unexpected turn. Alexander the Great murder, accession, and the intimidation of Greece, 336-335 BC. Part 1, Chapter 8. Aigai, the moment that changed everything. In the late summer of 336 BC, the Macedonian elite gathers in Aigai, the old royal seat of the Argead dynasty. The occasion is celebratory. Weddings are held. Sacrifices are offered. Athletic games are staged. It is a carefully choreographed display of unity and success. Philip II of Macedon presents himself at the height of his power. Undisputed ruler of Greece, victor over the city-states, and the man on the verge of launching the greatest campaign of his age. A calculated gesture. When Philip enters the theater, he does so without a bodyguard. It is a deliberate gesture, a display of confidence, a signal that his authority is absolute and unchallenged. The king walks forward, exposed, visible to all. Then, in an instant, everything changes. The assassination from within the crowd steps Pausanias, a member of the royal bodyguard. He strikes. Philip collapses. The most powerful man in Greece lies dead before the assembled court. Shock ripples through the audience. The celebration freezes into disbelief. Within moments, Pausanias is killed as well, cut down before he can escape, before he can speak, before his motives can be fully understood. A power vacuum. With Philip's death, an entire political order is abruptly suspended. The king who unified Macedon, subdued Greece, and prepared the invasion of Asia is gone. His authority vanishes in a single blow, leaving behind uncertainty, fear, and opportunity. What follows is not mourning, but calculation. The question is no longer what has happened, but who will act first? A climate of suspicion. Even contemporaries begin to speculate. Was Pausanias acting entirely on his own? Or was he encouraged, protected, or exploited by others? The sources offer no definitive answers. They record possibilities, not conclusions. Political intrigue, personal manipulation, and opportunism all remain conceivable. What can be said with certainty is this. The murder occurs at a moment of maximum political tension, when the removal of Philip reshapes the balance of power across Greece. Unanswered questions. History provides no final verdict. Pausanias may have been driven by personal resentment. He may also have served interests larger than himself. Knowingly or unknowingly, the truth is lost, and yet the uncertainty itself becomes part of the historical reality. The lack of clarity ensures that suspicion lingers, shaping how Philip's death is remembered and how Alexander's rise is perceived. In the aftermath of the murder, doubt proves as powerful as evidence. Alexander the Great Rumors, Shadows Silence. Part 1, Chapter 9. Very quickly, attention turns toward two figures, Alexander the Great and his mother Olympias. There is no evidence, no document, no confession, no proof that directly implicates either of them in the murder of Philip. And yet suspicion grows, not because facts demand it, but because circumstances invite it. The weight of circumstance. It is known that Olympias later honors Pausanias. It is equally clear that Alexander benefits immediately from his father's death. Both facts are recorded. Neither constitutes proof, but together they feed rumor. In the political climate of the Macedonian court, perception matters more than certainty. Silence does not end suspicion, it allows it to spread. What Alexander understands for Alexander, one thing is decisive, not what is true, but what is believed. He understands that rumors destroy reputations. Doubt undermines authority. A king who allows uncertainty to linger invites resistance. Truth may be elusive. Power cannot be. Alexander the Great, the throne taken, not inherited. Part 1, Chapter 10. Alexander is 20 years old when he becomes king. His position is anything but secure. In Macedon, there is no fixed law of succession. Kings are not crowned by birthright alone. They must be accepted by the army, by the nobility, by the court. And Alexander is young, ambitious, and the son of a foreign mother. Legitimacy is fragile. Immediate action. Alexander does not wait. Before resistance can organize, before doubt can solidify into opposition, he moves decisively. Potential rivals are eliminated. Members of the court who question his claim or maintain ties to competing lines are executed or forced into exile. There is no gradual consolidation. There is no hesitation. The elimination of Attalus. Among those removed is Attalus, a powerful figure at court and the uncle of Philip's last wife. Attalus represents a direct threat, political influence, military connections, and a bloodline that could challenge Alexander's position. According to the sources, he is killed on Alexander's orders, with the execution carried out by Parmenion. The message is unmistakable. A brutal beginning. This is a brutal beginning to Alexander's reign, but it is not chaotic, it is calculated. Alexander understands that uncertainty breeds rebellion. Mercy at this moment would be interpreted as weakness. By acting swiftly and without ambiguity, he removes alternatives before they can take shape. A signal to the kingdom. The signal sent throughout Macedon is clear. Hesitation means death. Resistance will not be tolerated. The throne is not offered to Alexander. It is seized and secured. Only now does he truly become king. Recognition by Greece. Power requires form. After securing his position within Macedon, Alexander turns south. Greece is quiet, but it is not loyal. The city-states obeyed Philip II of Macedon, yet they do not mourn him. His authority ended with his death. Alexander understands this immediately. Force alone will not suffice. Rule requires legitimacy, confirming authority. Alexander travels to Corinth, where the League of Corinth is convened once more. There the Greek states formally confirm him as hegemon, supreme military leader of the alliance. Treaties are renewed. Obligations are reaffirmed. Alexander presents himself not as a revolutionary, but as the rightful successor to his father. He positions himself as the guardian of an existing order, not its destroyer. This distinction matters. Power given shape. By seeking recognition, Alexander transforms raw authority into accepted command. What he has taken by force in Macedon, he now clothes in law and agreement in Greece. The message is calculated: continuity, not chaos. Alexander does not abolish Philip's system. He inherits it publicly and thereby stabilizes it, a fragile order. Yet this order remains delicate. Greek submission rests on memory rather than loyalty, on exhaustion rather than conviction. Beneath the formal declarations lies resentment, waiting for opportunity. Alexander knows this. The confirmation at Corinth does not end resistance. It merely postpones it. Power has been given form, but it will soon be tested. The north in flames, Thracians and Illyrians. No sooner has Alexander secured recognition in Greece than unrest breaks out in the north. Thracian and Illyrian tribes rise in rebellion. They believe the moment is favorable. A young king, a recent succession, a possible weakening of authority. They misjudge him. Immediate response. Alexander reacts without hesitation. In the spring of 335 BC, he leads an army of up to 25,000 men northward. The campaign is swift and aggressive. His forces cross mountain ranges, march through hostile territory, and push beyond traditional boundaries. At one point, Alexander even crosses the Danube, an extraordinary act that shocks both allies and enemies alike. The message is unmistakable. There will be no testing of this king. Suppression without mercy. The uprisings are crushed with brutal efficiency. Thousands are killed. Survivors are enslaved and deported south. Entire regions are subdued through force, not negotiation. From a purely military standpoint, the campaign is not strictly necessary. The revolts pose no immediate existential threat to Macedon. Politically, however, the campaign is indispensable, a calculated demonstration. Alexander understands that uncertainty invites rebellion. By striking quickly and decisively, he removes any illusion that his rule might be weaker than his father's. On the contrary, he makes clear that resistance under his reign will be met with overwhelming violence. The northern campaign is not about territory, it is about reputation. A dangerous comparison. When the campaign ends, the conclusion is unavoidable. Alexander's authority is not merely equal to that of Philip II of Macedon. In the eyes of many, it appears even more dangerous. The lesson spreads rapidly, through rumor, fear, and memory. Macedon has a new king, and he will not be tested twice. The fatal lie. While Alexander is fighting in the north, something decisive unfolds in the south. The Athenian orator Demosthenes spreads a rumor: Alexander is dead. Macedon has been left without a king. The moment of freedom has arrived. The claim is false, but it is effective. The spark of rebellion. In Thebes, the population rises in revolt. The Macedonian garrison is expelled. The city declares its defiance openly. Elsewhere in Greece, reactions are more cautious. Other cities watch. They hesitate. They hope. For a brief moment, the balance of power appears uncertain, the illusion of opportunity. The rumor spreads precisely because it fits what many want to believe. A young king, far from home, a recent succession, a northern campaign. The lie gives form to expectation, and expectation turns quickly into action. Alexander learns of the revolt. Alexander receives news of the uprising while still in the north. There is no confusion, no delay, no attempt at negotiation. He understands immediately what is at stake. If the revolt is not crushed without hesitation, Greece will follow Thebes. Authority once questioned will dissolve rapidly. Alexander does not respond with words. He moves. The march on Thebes. Speed as a weapon. Alexander breaks off his northern campaign immediately. Without pause, without consolidation, he turns south and begins a rapid march toward Thebes. The pace is extraordinary. Within only a few days, his army appears before the city's gates. Thebes does not expect him. Even fewer expect his determination. Shock and disbelief. The speed of Alexander's movement is itself a strategic blow. News travels slower than his army. The assumption that the king is far away, perhaps even dead, collapses the moment Macedonian troops appear on the horizon. Hope turns to confusion. Confusion turns to fear. Alexander has not come to test the situation. He has come to end it. An offer without illusions. Alexander does offer negotiations, but the terms make his intentions unmistakable. Submission is required. The leaders of the revolt must be surrendered. Macedonian authority must be restored without condition. In effect, the offer amounts to capitulation. Thebes refuses. The point of no return. With that decision, the fate of the city is sealed. There will be no drawn-out siege, no prolonged debate, no compromise. The refusal confirms Alexander's assessment. Hesitation would be interpreted as weakness, mercy as invitation. The march on Thebes is not merely a military operation. It is a demonstration. Speed has eliminated uncertainty. Presence has erased rumor. And refusal has removed all remaining options. What follows will serve as a warning to all of Greece. Alexander the Great, The Destruction of Thebes, Terror as Strategy. Part 1, Chapter 11. Alexander gives the order to attack. What follows is not a conventional victory, it is an example. The city of Thebes is systematically destroyed. Street by street, district by district, resistance is crushed with overwhelming force. Approximately 6,000 inhabitants are killed. Around 30,000 are taken captive and sold into slavery. The scale of destruction is deliberate. Erasing a city. Only a few structures are spared. The temples remain standing, and the house of the poet Pindar is left untouched. Everything else is reduced to ruins. Thebes, once one of the most powerful cities in Greece, ceases to exist as a political entity. Its walls fall. Its population is scattered. Its name becomes a warning. Shock waves through Greece. The effect is immediate. The Greek world is stunned. The destruction of Thebes is not interpreted as punishment, it is understood as a message directed not only at rebels, but at all who might consider resistance. Alexander does not issue proclamations. He does not explain his actions. The ruins speak for him, terror as calculation. This act is not driven by rage, it is calculated. Alexander understands that mercy, in this moment, would invite further defiance. Fear, by contrast, will secure obedience faster than any treaty. The destruction of Thebes is therefore not an excess. It is a strategy. By annihilating one city completely, Alexander ensures the submission of all others without further bloodshed. Deterrence works. After the destruction of Thebes, No Greek city dares to rise again. Athens falls silent. Sparta remains isolated. Greece is paralyzed, not by occupation, but by fear. No Macedonian garrisons are required. No further campaigns are necessary. The lesson has been learned. Silence as submission. Alexander has achieved precisely what he intended. The southern flank is secured. There will be no uprisings, no distractions, no threats from behind. The Greek world, once restless and defiant, now watches and waits. The cost of resistance has been made unmistakably clear. Alexander has become king by acting decisively, by moving faster than his enemies, and by showing no hesitation in moments of doubt. He has learned that power is not granted, it is taken, and that fear can be a more effective instrument than consent. Yet all of this has taken place within a familiar world. Beyond Greece begins something else entirely, a realm of unimaginable size, an order governed by its own logic, an opponent that cannot be subdued through intimidation alone, but only through decision. The young king has secured his throne. Now it will be tested beyond the borders of his homeland. With the crossing of the Hellespont, Alexander's path as a successor comes to an end, and his path as a conqueror begins. More on Alexander's campaigns in Part 2.